The palace of the Velen Empire stretched across the purple mountains like a giant made of crystal and light. Every wall glowed with soft colors. Every tower reached toward the three moons that hung in the violet sky. It was the most beautiful place in the known galaxy, and Princess Yuna hated every corner of it. She stood in front of her mirror watching her reflection with tired eyes. Her skin gave off a faint blue glow, so weak that it was almost invisible. Among her people, this was shameful. The Velans were tall beings with bodies that shone like living stars. The brighter someone glowed, the more powerful and worthy they were considered. The dimmer the glow, the weaker the blood. Yuna was dim. She was also small. While other Velen women stood over 7 feet tall with long limbs and bright silver hair, Yuna barely reached 5.5 feet. Her hair was dark, almost black, with only small streaks of silver running through it. She looked like a shadow standing next to her sisters. Today was the selection festival. It was the most important day of the year for unmarried royals. Noble males from across the empire would come to the palace and choose their future partners from the royal bloodline. It was supposed to be a day of celebration and honor. For Yuna, it was a day of humiliation. She heard laughter coming from the room next door. Her elder sister Sara was getting ready with the help of 10 servants. Sara was the tallest of the 3 princesses. Her glow was so bright that she could light up an entire room just by walking into it. Every year, she received hundreds of selection offers. She always refused them, enjoying the power of being wanted. In the room on the other side, her second sister Hyun was singing softly while servants braided golden threads into her hair. Hyun was graceful and kind, with a gentle glow that made everyone feel warm. She too received many offers, though she was pickier than Sara. Yuna had no servants helping her. She had learned long ago to prepare herself. The servants always found excuses to help her sisters instead. She put on her ceremonial dress. It was white with silver patterns, designed to make her glow look stronger than it was. It did not work. She still looked like a dying candle next to her sister's blazing fires. A knock came at her door. She opened it to find her father's advisor, a tall Velen named Lord Teeman. He did not look at her with respect. He looked at her the way someone might look at a stain on an expensive carpet. "The Emperor requests that you stay near the back during the ceremony," Lord Teeman said. His voice was cold. "He does not wish for your condition to distract from your sister's glory." Yuna felt the words cut into her heart, but she kept her face calm. She had learned to hide her pain many years ago. "I understand," she said quietly. Lord Teeman nodded and walked away without another word. Yuna closed her door and sat on her bed. She did not cry. She had stopped crying about these things when she was a child. Crying changed nothing. Tears did not make her taller. Tears did not make her glow brighter. Tears only proved to everyone that she was as weak as they believed. The ceremony began an hour later. The grand hall of the palace was filled with thousands of Velans from the noble families. They all glowed in different colors: blue, gold, silver, and white. The room looked like a galaxy brought to life. Emperor Doha sat on his throne at the front of the hall. He was ancient and powerful, his glow a deep and steady gold that spoke of centuries of authority. Beside him sat the empty chair where the Empress once sat before she passed into the stars. He never spoke of her. Yuna sometimes wondered if her mother had been small too, if that was where she inherited her shame. The 3 princesses were presented to the crowd. Sora walked first, her head held high, her silver glow filling the hall with light. The crowd gasped in admiration. Males stepped forward immediately, declaring their interest. Hyun walked next, her movements soft and elegant like flowing water. Her glow was warmer, more inviting. More males stepped forward. Then it was Yuna's turn. She walked slowly to the center of the hall. The room fell silent, but not in admiration. It was the silence of discomfort, the silence of people who did not know where to look. No one stepped forward. Yuna stood there for what felt like an eternity. She kept her eyes fixed on a point above the crowd, refusing to show her hurt. She counted her heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 10, 20. Still no one moved. Finally, the ceremony master cleared his throat. We will. We will give the noble males more time to consider, he announced awkwardly. But everyone knew what this meant. No one wanted her. No one would ever want her. Yuna bowed slightly and walked back to her place at the edge of the hall. She could feel the pitying looks burning into her back. Worse than pity was the contempt she saw in some eyes. To them, she was not just unwanted. She was an embarrassment to the royal bloodline. After the ceremony, her sisters were surrounded by admirers. Sora laughed loudly, enjoying the attention. Hyun smiled politely at each suitor who approached her. Neither of them looked at Yuna. They never did during these events. It was easier for everyone to pretend she did not exist. Yuna slipped away from the crowd and made her way to the observation deck at the top of the palace. It was her favorite place, high above everything, where she could see the stars without seeing the judgment in people's eyes. She sat on the cold crystal floor and looked up at the endless darkness filled with distant lights. Somewhere out there were other worlds, other peoples, other ways of living. She had read about them in books. The tall warriors of the Kreth system, the ancient scholars of the Mindari Collective, and the newest species to join the galactic community, the humans from a small planet called Earth. She knew nothing about humans except that they were considered primitive and short-lived. Other species laughed at them, but Yuna felt a strange kinship with them. They were outsiders too. They were looked down upon. Perhaps they understood what it meant to be judged and found lacking. The door behind her opened. She did not turn around. She knew who it was. "Father sent Lord Timon to find you," said a soft voice. It was her maid, a young servant named Mina, who was one of the few people who treated Yuna with kindness. "What does he want?" Yuna asked. Mina hesitated. "He suggests that you remove yourself from public ceremonies going forward. He believes it would be better for the family's image." Yuna closed her eyes. The pain was familiar now, like an old wound that never fully healed. "Tell him I understand," she whispered. Mina's footsteps retreated, leaving Yuna alone with the stars. She stayed there for hours, watching the lights in the darkness. Each star was a sun. Each sun might have planets. Each planet might have someone looking up at the sky, feeling alone and unwanted. She pressed her hand against the cold glass window. "Is there anyone out there," she whispered, "who could see me for what I am? Not for how tall I stand or how bright I glow, but for what I carry in my heart." The stars did not answer. But somewhere, across the vast emptiness of space, a ship carrying humans was making its way toward the Galactic Trade Summit. And on that ship was a young man named Kang Jisoo, who was about to change everything. Yuna did not know this yet. She only knew the weight of her loneliness and the small, stubborn flame of hope that refused to die inside her chest. Tomorrow she would hide in the shadows again. Tonight she let herself dream of a different life. And the stars watched over her in silence. The Galactic Trade Summit was held on a massive space station floating between three star systems. It was neutral ground where all species could meet, negotiate, and form alliances. Ships from hundreds of worlds arrived every hour, carrying diplomats, merchants, and curious travelers. The Velen delegation arrived in a ship made of pure white crystal that caught the light of nearby stars. Everyone at the station stopped to watch as Emperor Doha and his family walked down the landing ramp. The royal family glowed so brightly that they seemed to carry their own sun with them. Everyone except Yuna. She had been told to stay on the ship. Her father had made it very clear that her presence would not be required at any official functions. She was to remain in her quarters out of sight until the summit was over. Yuna had agreed without argument. What was the point of fighting? She had fought for years and nothing had changed. But as she sat alone in her small room on the ship, listening to the sounds of celebration outside, something inside her began to stir. It was a feeling she had tried to bury for a long time. Rebellion. Why should she hide? She had done nothing wrong. Her only crime was being born different, and she was tired of being punished for something she could not control. She stood up and looked at herself in the mirror. She took off her royal jewelry and changed into simple clothes that any common Velen might wear. Without her formal dress and her family's symbols, she looked ordinary. Nobody would recognize her. Her heart beat fast as she slipped out of the ship and into the crowded station. The Galactic Trade Summit was like nothing she had ever seen. There were creatures of every shape and size walking through the wide corridors. Some had scales, some had fur, some floated in the air, some had so many eyes that Yuna could not count them all. And then there were the humans. She saw a group of them walking together, led by a woman in a dark uniform. They were so strange to look at. They did not glow at all. Their skin came in different shades of brown and pink. They were small compared to most species, barely taller than Yuna herself. The other aliens watched the humans with curiosity, and sometimes with contempt. Yuna heard a group of Kreth warriors laughing at them. "Look at those creatures," one Kreth said loudly. "They live for less than 100 years. What can they possibly accomplish in such short lives?" The humans either did not hear or chose to ignore the insult. They kept walking with calm faces and steady steps. Yuna felt a strange respect for them. They knew they were being mocked, but they did not let it break their dignity. She wandered through the station for hours, exploring places she had only read about in books. She found a marketplace selling food from 100 worlds. She found a museum displaying ancient artifacts from civilizations that no longer existed. She found a theater where strange beings performed plays in languages she did not understand. And then she found the botanical garden. It was a large dome filled with plants from across the galaxy. There were flowers that sang when touched. There were trees with leaves made of crystal. There were vines that moved like living snakes. The air smelled sweet and fresh, so different from the cold emptiness of the Velen Palace. Yuna walked slowly through the garden, touching the strange plants and smiling for the first time in days. Here, alone among growing things, she could pretend she was not a failed princess. She could pretend she was just a girl exploring the universe. She found a quiet corner near a small pond filled with glowing fish. She sat down on a stone bench and looked at the water, watching the fish swim in lazy circles. That was when she heard the scratching sound. She turned and saw a human male sitting on another bench nearby. He had a small book in his hands and was drawing something with a thin stick. His hair was dark and slightly messy. His face was focused on his work, his tongue sticking out slightly as he concentrated. He looked up and noticed her watching him. "Oh, hello," he said in the common galactic language. His accent was strange, but his voice was warm. "I did not see you there. Sorry if I disturbed you." "You did not disturb me," Yuna said carefully. She was not used to strangers speaking to her with such casual friendliness. "What are you drawing?" The human smiled and held up his book. On the page was a detailed sketch of one of the singing flowers nearby. It was beautiful, capturing not just the shape of the flower but somehow its feeling too. "I am trying to draw everything I see," he explained. "I am an engineer, but I also love art. Everything here is so new and amazing. I want to remember it all." Yuna moved closer to look at his drawings. There were pages filled with aliens, plants, and strange machines. Each drawing was made with care and attention. "These are wonderful," she said honestly. The human's face brightened. "Thank you, I am Jisoo, Kang Jisoo." He held out his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Yuna hesitated for a moment, then took his hand. His skin was warm against hers. "I am Yuna," she said, leaving out her title. "Yuna," Jisoo repeated. "That is a nice name. It sounds a bit like names from my home country on Earth." Your country has many syllables in its names, Yuna asked. Jisoo laughed softly. Something like that. Are you here for the summit? You look Velen, but... He paused, seeming unsure how to continue. But I do not glow as brightly as other Velans, Yuna finished for him. She waited for the look of pity or disgust that she usually received. Instead, Jisoo shrugged. I was going to say you look like you would rather be anywhere else. I recognize that expression. I wear it myself at most diplomatic meetings. Yuna blinked in surprise. No one had ever responded to her appearance like that before. Jisoo patted the bench beside him. Would you like to sit? I was about to eat my lunch, Earth food. It is nothing special, but I have enough to share. Yuna sat down without thinking. She watched as Jisoo pulled out small containers from his bag. Inside were strange foods she had never seen before. White balls of something sticky, vegetables cut into tiny pieces, and meat wrapped in thin sheets. This is called gimbap, Jisoo explained. It is rice and vegetables wrapped in seaweed. Very simple but very good for eating while exploring. He offered her a piece. She took it carefully and put it in her mouth. The taste was mild but pleasant, with different textures coming together. It is good, she said, surprised. Jisoo smiled widely. I am glad you like it. Not many aliens are willing to try human food. They think we are too primitive to make anything worth eating. Do people say that to you often? Yuna asked. That humans are primitive? Jisoo nodded, but he did not seem bothered. All the time. We are new to space travel. We live short lives. We do not glow or have special powers. By alien standards, we are not very impressive. Does it hurt you when they say those things? Jisoo thought for a moment. Sometimes, but my grandmother used to tell me something wise. She said that people who try to make you feel small are usually afraid of how big you might become. Yuna felt those words sink into her heart. They felt like medicine on an old wound. They talked for hours after that. Jisoo told her about Earth, its blue oceans, its green forests, its cities filled with millions of people living together. He told her about human music and art and stories. He told her about how humans believed that every person had value, not because of what they could do, but simply because they existed. Yuna listened with wonder. The Velen way of measuring worth suddenly seemed so narrow compared to this human philosophy. On my world, she admitted quietly, I am considered worthless. I am too small, too dim. Nobody wants me. Jisoo stopped eating and looked at her seriously. Then your world is wrong. Yuna's breath caught in her chest. What? Any world that measures worth by size or brightness is missing the most important things, Jisoo said firmly. Kindness, courage, the ability to dream, the willingness to hope even when everything is against you. Those are the things that make someone truly valuable. He smiled at her, his eyes warm. And you, Yuna, have been sitting here talking to a stranger from a primitive planet for hours. That takes more courage than glowing ever could. Yuna felt something crack open inside her. Something that had been frozen for years began to melt. For the first time in her life, someone saw her. Not her glow, not her height, not her royal blood. Just her. The station's lights dimmed as the artificial night cycle began. Neither of them noticed how much time had passed. I should go, Yuna said reluctantly. My family will wonder where I am. Jisoo nodded. Will I see you again? Tomorrow, maybe. I will be here at the same time drawing more flowers. Yuna hesitated. She knew she should say no. She should go back to hiding on the ship where she belonged. But for once in her life, she wanted to choose hope. Yes, she said, I will come. Jisoo's smile was brighter than any Velen glow she had ever seen. And Yuna walked away feeling lighter than she had in years. The days at the Galactic Trade Summit passed quickly, and Yuna found herself living a double life. During the day, she stayed in her quarters on the Velen ship, pretending to be the obedient forgotten princess. But every afternoon, she would slip away to the botanical garden where Jisoo waited for her with his sketchbook and warm smile. Each meeting taught her something new about humans. She learned that they expressed emotions through their faces in ways that other species found strange. They laughed loudly when happy. They cried when sad. They touched each other freely, holding hands or embracing as signs of affection. "Does it not embarrass you?" Yuna asked one day, "showing your feelings so openly?" Jisoo looked puzzled. "Why would it embarrass me? Feelings are natural. Hiding them seems more strange to me." Yuna thought about the Velen court, where showing emotion was considered weak and primitive. Even when she was young and her heart was broken by rejection, she had been taught to stand tall and keep her face empty. Feelings were private things, locked away where no one could see them. "My people believe that true strength is control," she explained. "The less you show, the more powerful you appear." Jisoo nodded slowly. "I understand that way of thinking, but on Earth, we have learned something different. The people who share their feelings, who let themselves be vulnerable, they build the strongest connections. They create families and friendships that last lifetimes. Hiding your heart only makes you alone." Yuna felt the truth of his words deep in her chest. She had been alone her entire life, surrounded by people but connected to no one. Her father saw her as a stain on his legacy. Her sisters treated her as if she did not exist. The court viewed her as an object of pity and contempt. Only here, with this human who knew nothing of her royal blood, did she feel truly seen. On the fifth day of their meetings, Yuna finally told Jisoo the truth. "I am not just any Velen," she said quietly. They were sitting by the glowing pond again, watching the fish swim. "I am Princess Yuna, third daughter of Emperor Doha." She waited for his reaction. Would he become formal and distant? Would he bow and call her by her title? Would he realize that she had been deceiving him? Jisoo raised his eyebrows in surprise. Then he smiled the same warm smile he always wore. "That explains the expensive fabric on your common clothes," he said. "I was wondering about that." Yuna stared at him. That is all you have to say. I am royalty." "And I am an engineer who cannot stop drawing flowers," Jisoo replied. "Should I treat you differently now that I know your family name? Should I stop sharing my lunch with you?" "Most people would become very careful around a princess." Jisoo shrugged. "On Earth, we have a saying, a title does not change the soul. You are the same person today that you were yesterday. The same person who laughs at my bad jokes and asks me 100 questions about human culture. Why would I change how I act when you have not changed who you are?" Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. She quickly looked away, ashamed of the display of emotion. But Jisoo reached out and gently touched her hand. "It is okay to cry," he said softly. "Tears are not weakness. They are proof that you care about something deeply, and caring is the bravest thing anyone can do." Yuna let the tears fall. For the first time in years, she did not hide her pain. They sat in silence for a long time. Jisoo held her hand and asked nothing. He simply offered his presence, his warmth, his acceptance. When Yuna finally spoke again, her voice was steady. "Tell me more about Earth," she said. "Tell me about your grandmother, the Wise One." Jisoo's eyes grew soft with memory. Her name was Grandma Yunji. She was a tiny woman, even by human standards. She walked with a cane and her hair was completely white, but she was the strongest person I ever knew. "How can someone small and old be strong?" "Because strength is not about size," Jisoo said. "Grandma Yunji survived a war when she was young. She lost her home, her family, everything. But she rebuilt her life piece by piece. She raised children who raised children. She planted a garden that still blooms every spring. She told stories that still live in my heart." He paused and looked at Yuna directly. "She once told me that the smallest lights are often the most precious. A candle in darkness is worth more than the sun at noon, because the candle chooses to burn when everything around it is cold and empty." Yuna felt those words wrap around her like a warm blanket. "Your grandmother sounds wonderful," she whispered. "She would have liked you," Jisoo said. "She always loved people who were brave enough to be different." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by a commotion outside the garden. Loud voices echoed through the corridors. Yuna and Jisoo went to see what was happening. In the main hall of the station, a crowd had gathered. At the center stood a tall Velen noble named Lord Hyunsu. He was one of the high lords who had been most cruel in mocking Yuna over the years. Now his bright glow pulsed with anger as he faced a group of human diplomats. "You dare to speak to me as equals," Lord Hyunsu was shouting. "You are nothing but short-lived primitives. Your species has been walking upright for the blink of an eye. The Velen Empire ruled the stars while your ancestors were still living in caves." The human diplomats stood calmly, but their faces showed hurt at the harsh words. The leader of their group, a woman named Ambassador Minji, stepped forward. "Lord Hyunsu, we came to this summit seeking peaceful cooperation," she said. Her voice was steady despite the insult. "Humanity respects the Velen Empire's long history and great achievements. We only ask for the same basic respect in return." "Respect must be earned," Lord Hyunsu laughed coldly. "What have humans earned? You have no empire, you have no glow, you have no power worth mentioning. You are beneath our notice." The crowd murmured. Some aliens seemed uncomfortable with Lord Hyunsu's cruelty, but no one spoke against him. The Velen Empire was too powerful to challenge. Yuna watched, feeling sick. She had heard her people speak this way many times. She had always accepted it as natural. Now, standing beside Jisoo, she saw the ugliness of such arrogance for the first time. Jisoo stepped forward. "May I speak?" he asked. His voice was calm but carried across the silent hall. Lord Hyunsu looked at him with amusement. "The engineer wants to defend his primitive race. How entertaining. Speak, little human. Let us hear your wisdom." Jisoo walked to the center of the crowd. He was so much smaller than the towering Velens around him. He should have looked weak and powerless, but somehow he did not. "You measure worth by how long a species has existed," Jisoo said. "By how brightly they glow and how much space they control. These are interesting measurements, but I wonder if they capture what truly matters." Lord Hyunsu crossed his arms. "And what, according to primitive humans, truly matters?" "Connection," Jisoo answered. "Compassion. The ability to see beauty in others instead of just in ourselves. The willingness to help strangers even when we gain nothing. The courage to admit when we are wrong." He looked around at the gathered aliens. "Humanity is young, this is true. We do not glow, this is also true. But in our short time among the stars, we have learned something that perhaps older species have forgotten. Every person, every being, every light in this universe has value, not because of their power or their age, but because they exist, because they can feel joy and pain, because they can love and be loved." The hall was completely silent. "You call us primitive," Jisoo continued. "Maybe we are, but we are also teachers, healers, artists, and dreamers. We build families that span generations. We tell stories that make people weep and laugh. We look at strangers and see not enemies but possible friends." He turned to face Lord Hyunsu directly. "I will not argue that humanity is better than any other species. That would make me no different from you. But I will say this. A universe that measures worth only by power and brightness is a cold and lonely universe. And I believe, deep in my heart, that most beings want something more than coldness and loneliness." Lord Hyunsu's glow flickered with an emotion Yuna had never seen from him before: uncertainty. Ambassador Minji stepped forward and bowed slightly to Jisoo. "Thank you, Engineer Kang." The crowd slowly broke apart, aliens whispering among themselves. Lord Hyunsu left without another word, his glow dimmer than before. Yuna found Jisoo back at the garden later. Her heart was beating fast with an emotion she could not name. "That was incredible," she said. You stood before a Velen lord and spoke truth without fear. Jisoo laughed softly. I was terrified. My hands are still shaking. Look. He held up his hands, and indeed they trembled slightly. But you did it anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear, Jisoo said. It is choosing to act despite the fear. Another thing my grandmother taught me. Yuna sat beside him and took his shaking hand in hers. I think I am beginning to fall in love with the human way of seeing things, she said quietly. Jisoo turned to look at her. His eyes were warm and deep as oceans. Only the human way of seeing things, he asked softly. Yuna felt her face grow warm in a way that had nothing to do with glowing. She did not answer, but she did not let go of his hand. And somewhere in her heart, a small light began to burn brighter than ever before. The Galactic Trade Summit ended after 2 weeks. Treaties were signed. Trade agreements were made. The great ships of 100 worlds prepared to return to their homes. For Yuna, the end of the summit felt like the end of a beautiful dream. She would return to the cold crystal palace. She would return to hiding in shadows and being ignored. And worst of all, she would return to the final selection ceremony, where her future would be sealed forever. She met Jisoo one last time in the botanical garden. The singing flowers seemed quieter today, as if they knew something sad was happening. I do not want to go back, Yuna admitted. Her voice was small and tired. Jisoo sat beside her, his sketchbook closed for once. What will happen when you return? The final selection. It is my last ceremony. If no male chooses me this time, I will be declared officially unworthy. I will lose my title. I will be sent away from the palace to live in isolation for the rest of my life. Jisoo's face grew serious. That is cruel. It is tradition, Yuna laughed bitterly. Among my people, tradition is more important than kindness. They sat in silence for a long moment. The glowing fish swam in their endless circles, unaware of the pain floating above their pond. When is this ceremony? Jisoo asked. 7 days after I return home. Jisoo stood up suddenly. His eyes had a fire in them that Yuna had not seen before. The human delegation is invited to visit the Velen Empire next month, he said, as part of the new friendship agreements, but I am going to request that we arrive earlier, much earlier. Yuna stared at him. Why? Because I am not going to let you face that ceremony alone. Jisoo took her hands in his. I do not know what I can do, maybe nothing, but I will be there, I promise you that. Yuna felt tears threatening again. Jisoo, this is not your fight. You are a human. My people will never accept you interfering in royal matters. Then they will have to drag me away, Jisoo said firmly. Some things are worth fighting for, even when you cannot win. He smiled at her, brave and stubborn and beautiful. Besides, who knows? Maybe a primitive human can surprise everyone. The Velen ship departed that evening. Yuna watched from her window as the station grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared among the stars. Somewhere on that station, Jisoo was already arguing with his superiors, trying to change the schedule of the human delegation. She did not know if he would succeed. She did not know if his presence would make any difference. But for the first time in her life, someone was fighting for her. Someone saw her as worth saving. That knowledge alone gave her strength. 7 days passed slowly. The palace prepared for the final selection with decorations and music. Yuna's sisters were fitted for new gowns. Servants rushed through the halls carrying flowers and lights. Everyone was excited about the great celebration. Everyone except Yuna. She spent her days in her room, reading human books that Jisoo had given her. Stories about brave people who overcame impossible challenges. Poems about love that crossed all boundaries. Histories of humans who changed their world through kindness and courage. On the morning of the ceremony, her maid Mina came to her room with news. Princess Yuna, Mina whispered excitedly. There is a human ship approaching the planet. They are requesting permission to land. Yuna's heart jumped. They came early. They say it is for diplomatic reasons, something about wanting to observe Velan traditions. Mina smiled knowingly. The ship carries the engineering team from the trade summit. He kept his promise. Yuna dressed carefully for the ceremony. This time, she did not try to hide her dim glow or make herself look taller. She wore a simple white dress with no decorations. If this was to be her last day as a princess, she would face it as herself. The great hall was even more crowded than before. Nobles from every corner of the empire had come to witness the final selection. Emperor Doha sat on his throne, his face expressionless. Her sisters stood near the front, already surrounded by their chosen partners from the previous ceremony. And in the corner, among a small group of human visitors, stood Kang Jisoo. Their eyes met across the hall. He gave her a small nod of encouragement. The ceremony began with the usual rituals. Prayers were spoken, blessings were given. The history of the royal bloodline was recited by the ceremony master. Then the selection started. One by one, unmarried royals were presented to the gathering. Noble males stepped forward to claim them, speaking formal words of intention. Each claim was witnessed and recorded. Finally, it was Yuna's turn. She walked to the center of the hall. The whispers started immediately. She could hear them clearly, even though they tried to be quiet. The dim one. Such a shame. Why does the emperor even allow her to participate? It is her last chance. After this, she will be gone. Yuna stood in the center of the selection circle and waited. The silence stretched on and on. Seconds became minutes. She kept her eyes forward, her face calm, her heart breaking piece by piece inside her chest. The ceremony master cleared his throat nervously. Are there any claims for Princess Yuna? No one moved. Emperor Doha's face grew dark with shame. He leaned toward Lord Teeman and whispered something. Lord Teeman nodded and prepared to stand, ready to announce Yuna's official rejection. Then a voice cut through the silence. I claim the right of selection. Every head in the hall turned toward the corner where the humans stood. Jisoo stepped forward. He was wearing a simple dark uniform, nothing compared to the glowing robes of the Velan nobles. He looked small and plain and completely out of place. But he walked with his head high, his eyes steady, his step unafraid. The hall erupted in shocked gasps. A human. This is impossible. He cannot be serious. Lord Teeman stepped forward, his glow bright with anger. This is outrageous. The selection is only for Velan nobles. Aliens have no right to participate. Jisoo stopped in front of the throne and bowed respectfully to Emperor Doha. Your Imperial Majesty, he said clearly, I have studied the ancient laws of the selection. Nowhere in the texts does it say that claims must come only from Velans. The law says that any male of worthy standing may claim a royal. It does not specify species. The crowd murmured. Scholars looked at each other in confusion. He is lying, Lord Hyunsu shouted. He had pushed his way to the front, his face twisted with anger. The law was written when we believed we were alone in the universe. It was never intended to include aliens. And yet the law is the law, Jisoo replied calmly. Unless the emperor himself wishes to declare that Velan traditions can be changed whenever convenient. A heavy silence fell over the hall. Emperor Doha stared at Jisoo with unreadable eyes. Everyone waited for his response. The ancient laws were sacred to the Velan people. Breaking them would undermine everything their society was built on, but accepting a human's claim would be an unthinkable scandal. Finally, the emperor spoke. The human speaks truth. His voice was cold and hard. The law does not specify species. I cannot reject his claim without breaking the sacred codes. The crowd gasped again. However, the emperor continued, any male who claims a royal must prove his worth through the 3 trials: combat, wisdom, heart. If the human wishes to pursue his claim, he must face these tests. If he fails even one, he will be rejected and banished from our world forever. Lord Hyunsu smiled cruelly. Let him try, a primitive human against our champions. He will not survive the first trial. Jisoo looked at Yuna. She saw fear in his eyes, but also determination, and something else, something warm and steady that she was only beginning to understand. I accept the 3 trials, Jisoo said. The hall fell into chaos. Nobles argued, scholars debated, warriors laughed at the foolish human who thought he could challenge their kind. But Yuna saw none of it. She saw only Jisoo, standing alone in the center of a hostile crowd, ready to fight for her. Emperor Doha raised his hand for silence. The trials will begin at sunset, he declared. Let the human prove his worth or meet his failure. As the crowd broke apart, Yuna managed to move close to Jisoo. She could not speak to him openly, but she reached out and touched his hand briefly. You are insane, she whispered. Jisoo smiled at her. Probably, but some things are worth being insane for. He squeezed her fingers gently, before guards pulled him away to prepare for the trials. Yuna watched him go, her heart filled with terror and hope in equal measure. The sun was already beginning to set. In a few hours, everything would be decided. And the smallest princess in Velan history dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, a human could do the impossible. The trial arena was a massive circle carved from black stone, surrounded by thousands of seats that rose toward the purple sky. 3 moons hung overhead, casting silver light on the gathering below. Every noble family in the empire had come to watch the impossible spectacle, a human challenging for the hand of a princess. Yuna sat in the royal viewing section, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her father sat nearby, his face like carved ice. Her sisters whispered behind their fans, clearly enjoying the drama. Lord Hyunsu had taken a seat at the front, eager to watch the human fail. Jisoo stood alone in the center of the arena. He had been given simple fighting clothes, nothing like the armored robes of Velan warriors. He looked so small under the vast sky, like a single candle facing an ocean of darkness. But when Yuna met his eyes across the distance, he smiled at her. That small, warm, stubborn smile that had changed her life. The ceremony master's voice boomed across the arena. The first trial, combat. The challenger must face a Velan warrior in single battle. The fight ends when one combatant yields or can no longer continue. The ground shook as a massive figure entered the arena. His name was General Seungho, the greatest warrior in the empire. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body covered in battle scars, his glow so bright it was almost blinding. He carried no weapon because he needed none. His fists alone had crushed enemies across a dozen star systems. The crowd cheered. This would be a quick execution. Jisoo bowed respectfully to his opponent. I am honored to face you, General. General Seungho laughed, a deep rumbling sound. You have courage, little human. I will try to end this quickly so you do not suffer too long. The signal was given. The battle began. General Seungho charged forward with terrifying speed. His fist swung toward Jisoo with enough force to shatter stone. Jisoo was not there. He had moved at the last moment, sliding to the side with a motion so smooth it seemed almost lazy. General Seungho's fist hit only air. The crowd fell silent in surprise. General Seungho attacked again, and again. Each time Jisoo slipped away, never trying to fight back, simply avoiding the massive blows. Stand still and fight, General Seungho roared in frustration. I am fighting, Jisoo replied. He was breathing hard, but his voice was calm. I am fighting in my own way. The battle continued for 20 minutes, 30, 40. General Seungho grew slower as exhaustion set in. His glow began to dim. His movements became clumsy. Jisoo kept moving, dodging, waiting. Yuna suddenly understood. Jisoo could not match the general's strength. No human could, but he did not need to. Humans, she remembered from their conversations, were persistent hunters. Their ancient ancestors survived by chasing prey until the prey simply collapsed from exhaustion. Jisoo was not trying to defeat the general. He was trying to outlast him. After nearly an hour, General Seungho fell to one knee. His glow had faded to almost nothing. His massive chest heaved as he gasped for air. "How," he breathed, "how are you still standing?" Jisoo stood before him, exhausted but upright. "My species learned long ago that sometimes the greatest strength is the willingness to endure. We may not be the fastest or the strongest, but we do not give up." General Seungho stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his head. "I yield," he said. The arena exploded with shocked voices. A human had won the trial of combat, not through power but through patience and persistence. Emperor Doha's face remained expressionless, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest, perhaps, or concern. The second trial began. The Keeper of Knowledge, an ancient Velen named Scholar Minyu, approached Jisoo. He carried a golden scroll containing the sacred riddle that all challengers must answer. "The trial of wisdom," the ceremony master announced. "The challenger must solve the riddle of the ancestors." Scholar Minyu unrolled the scroll and read in a voice like cracking ice. "I am the beginning of eternity, the end of time and space. I am at the heart of every race and the center of every face. What am I?" The crowd waited. This riddle had been used for thousands of years. Every Velen child learned the traditional answer, the light. It represented the Velen belief that their glow was the source of all meaning in the universe. Jisoo stood thinking for a long moment. Then he spoke. "The traditional answer is light, but I believe there is a deeper truth." The crowd murmured. This was unusual. "May I offer a different answer?" Jisoo asked. Scholar Minyu frowned. "You may speak, but if your answer is wrong, you will fail the trial." Jisoo nodded and turned to face the crowd. "The answer to your riddle is not light. The answer is the letter E." Confused whispers spread through the arena. "In the common language of the galaxy," Jisoo explained, "E is the beginning of the word eternity. E is the end of the words time and space. E is at the heart of the word race and the center of the word face." Scholar Minyu stared at him. His mouth opened and closed without sound. "But there is a reason your ancestors chose this riddle," Jisoo continued. "They were teaching you to look beyond the obvious. The riddle seems to be about cosmic truths, but it is actually about language and perspective. Your ancestors knew that wisdom means seeing things from new angles. It means questioning assumptions. It means understanding that there is always more than one way to view reality." He turned to the emperor. "For thousands of years, your people have answered light because you believe that glow represents worth. But your own sacred riddle proves that this is only one perspective among many. Perhaps true wisdom is learning to see worth in ways you never considered before." The arena was completely silent. Scholar Minyu slowly rolled up the scroll. His ancient face, for the first time in centuries, showed something like wonder. "The answer is correct," he announced. "The trial of wisdom is past." This time, the crowd's reaction was more complex. Some were outraged at the human's audacity, but others looked thoughtful, as if they were hearing ancient wisdom for the first time. The final trial approached. "The trial of heart," the ceremony master declared. "The challenger must speak before the court and declare why his chosen one is worthy of his claim." This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. What could a human possibly say about the dim, small, unwanted princess? Jisoo walked to the center of the arena. He looked up at Yuna in the royal section, and his eyes were full of something she could not name, something vast and warm and overwhelming. Then he began to speak. "I am not here to tell you about Princess Yuna's bloodline or her power. I am not here to measure her glow or her height. I am here to tell you about her heart. His voice carried across the silent arena. When I first met Yuna, she was sitting alone in a garden, far from her people, because her people had made her feel like she did not belong. She had every reason to be bitter, every reason to hate the universe that had treated her so cruelly. But instead, she was curious, kind, open to seeing beauty in a stranger from a primitive world. Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. She listened to my stories about Earth without judgment. She asked questions not to mock, but to understand. She saw value in things that her society had taught her to despise. That takes more courage than any warrior has ever shown in this arena. Jisu's voice grew stronger. You look at Princess Yuna and see a failure. I look at her and see someone who has been knocked down by life again and yet still chooses to hope, still chooses to care, still chooses to dream of a better world. He turned to face the Emperor directly. Your Majesty, you asked me to prove why she is worthy, but that question is backwards. Yuna does not need to prove her worth. She has always been worthy. The question is whether your empire is wise enough to see it. He looked back at Yuna, and his next words were spoken just for her. Yuna, I do not choose you because you are a princess. I choose you because you are the kindest, bravest, most beautiful soul I have ever known. I choose you because you saw me when no one else did. I choose you because your small light has guided me through darkness I did not even know I was lost in. His voice broke slightly. I choose you because I love you, and I will spend every day of my short human life proving that you are worth loving. Tears streamed down Yuna's face. She did not try to hide them. The arena was utterly silent. Even Lord Hunsu had nothing cruel to say. Emperor Doha rose slowly from his throne. His face was still hard, but something had changed in his eyes. He walked down from the royal platform and stood before Jisu. For a long moment they stared at each other, the ancient emperor and the young human. Then Emperor Doha spoke. You have passed the 3 trials. By the sacred laws of our ancestors, your claim is valid. He paused. But the final choice belongs to my daughter. She must accept or refuse. All eyes turned to Yuna. She stood up. Her legs were shaking. Her dim glow flickered with emotion. She walked down from the royal section and entered the arena. She stood before Jisu, looking up at this strange, wonderful human who had crossed the stars to fight for her. Do you truly mean it? She whispered. All those things you said. Jisu took her hands in his. Every word, every syllable, for as long as I live. Yuna smiled through her tears, and for the first time in her life, her glow began to brighten. It started as a faint shimmer barely visible. Then it grew stronger, warmer, brighter, until she was glowing with a light that rivaled her sister's, soft and golden and beautiful. The crowd gasped. Scholar Minyu spoke in wonder. The ancient texts speak of this, emotional awakening. When a Velen's heart is truly fulfilled, their light responds. Yuna looked at her own hands in amazement. She was glowing. She was actually glowing. But then she laughed softly and looked back at Jisu. I do not need to glow for you, she said. You loved me when I was dim. Jisu smiled. And I will love you however you shine, bright or dim, tall or small. It was never about the light, Yuna. It was always about you. Yuna turned to face the court, her head held high. I accept this claim, she declared. I choose Kang Jisu, not because he proved himself worthy by your standards, but because he showed me that I was always worthy by my own. She looked at her father with steady eyes. And if anyone has a problem with that, they are welcome to face the next human who comes along. Because if I have learned anything these past weeks, it is that humans should never be underestimated. Emperor Doha stared at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile. So be it, he said. Let the union be witnessed and recorded. Princess Yuna has made her choice." The announcement echoed across the empire and beyond. The story of the human who won a princess spread to every world in the galaxy. It changed how other species viewed humanity, and it changed how the Velans viewed themselves. That night, Yuna and Jisoo stood on the observation deck where she had once sat alone, staring at stars and wondering if she would ever belong. Now she stood wrapped in his arms, her glow casting soft light on his face. "You made me believe I could shine," she whispered. Jisoo kissed her forehead gently. "You always did," he said. "I just helped you see it." And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself was smiling.